ready to get going. Thanks for your patience. We figured out the nuances of Zoom. And hopefully I'm not the only one. Well, maybe I do hope I'm the only one sweating my brains out here in this really hot room. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Charlie Barlow. I am the Executive Director of the Boston Library Consortium, and I'm also the co-chair of the Project ReShare Steering Committee. I don't know how to advance the, there we go. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about Project ReShare and some of our latest advancements around ReShare Digital with my colleagues Boaz and Alan, who will take the proverbial stage in just a few minutes. For those of you that don't know, Project ReShare has been around as a community-led, community-owned resource sharing initiative since 2018. And has grown pretty exponentially since then and has been well represented here at WOLFcon over the years, although this is my first time here with you all for WOLFcon itself. We're talking about ReShare Digital today, which was a new initiative that we announced earlier this year in 2024 as a new and comprehensive suite of ReShare tools for digital lending. A number of kind of values are really guiding this work. One is putting ReShare's robust membership community first in setting development direction, in setting sort of strategic direction and ambition for the project. The next, standards-based, grounded in ISO 18666, which I'm sure Alan will speak more eloquently to than I can. Being interoperable and open to work well with others. ReShare Digital 2 is an extension of what is has been known as ReShare Returnables. So that is ReShare's physical returnables functionality for books. It's taking those physical returnables into the digital space, ultimately both the digital returnables, books, and also non-returnables as well. ReShare really works to empower our libraries of all types and sizes to play well with us. ReShare is a pretty eclectic mix of consortia with various libraries, academics, publics, state libraries, special libraries, with a really diverse set of needs. And then finally, this recent work in ReShare Digital has been really characterized by the role of advocacy in the broader library and information community, working with projects like NISO's interoperable system for CDL work, the ISO 18626 working groups, the CCLP project, the Collaborative Collection Lifecycle project. Can you folks hear us? Or I'll just keep going. Yeah, please mute yourself. And then working with other partners like Library Futures in terms of different advocacy avenues. And I know Alan will say a word or two about digital ownership in a few minutes. ReShare today stands as a membership organization of more than 30 consortia, libraries, and organizations, not just here in well, not in the United States, not in the United States, but also around the world. We've got 170 plus implementers live on the solution, and we're projected to have another 300 by the end of next year, particularly with the recent selection of ReShare to provide national resource sharing infrastructure in Australia. So really exciting developments for us here. I dug into the statistics yesterday as we were preparing for this presentation and was delighted to see that we hit the 1.5 million transaction mark. We keep missing these big milestones. And I'm going to make sure that we're on track to really celebrate the 2 millionth transaction when we get there, likely in a few months. Today we've had 16 software releases. Alan's going to speak to our most recent release and future aspirations. There are 5 consortia live on the project today, live on the system today, with 3 more planned in the relatively near future. And we're supporting 13 different ILSs, which of course is no small feat for a project like this. So really significant congratulations to those that are involved in developing this solution. ReShare is governed by a steering committee of about a dozen individuals representing different consortia, different libraries, service providers, and then we get our work done through a range of smaller committees. We have a communications and marketing committee that works to bring ReShare to conferences like this and to help tell the ReShare story far and wide. Recently did a big revamp of our website, projectreshare.org, so if you've not checked that out, please do. Our finance committee keeps the finance ship running smoothly, very focused on financial sustainability. We just revamped our membership dues structure in the last 12 months. A fundraising committee that works to solicit external resources. Just this past week, we submitted for an IMLS grant, which I'll keep my fingers crossed for the project. A product committee that helps shape the direction of the overall project. With representatives from all of the implementing consortia at that table. And then finally, the subject matter experts that bring phenomenally deep expertise to inform directions and functionalities and alert us to potential roadblocks along the way. Index data occupies a really distinctive position too in the ReShare space. I'm really kind of candidly not convinced that any other company could do the work that Index Data does as well as Index Data does with us. They sit with us as peers and as equals at the ReShare steering committee table, bringing really deep expertise and commitment to helping us to realize this pretty ambitious direction and aspiration for open source resource sharing. So today, ReShare looks like this. We're a modular platform for unmediated and interoperable resource sharing. There are three main components. First, beginning with our shared index reservoir, an optional shared discovery solution using ViewFind, and then an app-based structure for requesting and fulfillment. Some of the highlights from the past year. It's been a year of kind of rebuilding and growth for Project ReShare. An important reaffirmation and commitment to our community-owned roadmap. BLC, my organization, was selected as the fiscal sponsor of Project ReShare about 12 months ago. So we provide operational support, administrative support, financial management of Project ReShare's operations. We launched new membership models, as I said. That was in November of this past year, really seeking to foster transparency and equity and give consortia and libraries of all scales and all sizes and all resource capacities an opportunity to participate in our community governance. We also launched some point allocations for product enhancements, and Alan will get into the details of our ReShare Digital enhancement voting process that unfolded earlier in 2024, and then a number of new working groups, those committees that I just spoke to. I know everyone has been asking what we're doing with CDL, particularly in light of the recent Hachette outcome decision. ReShare has been working on developing CDL functionality for consortia for many years. As you can see here, underwritten by a number of different consortia coming together. BLC, MCLS put forward the money for initial software development. Pulsing and Polly came to the table to help think through the repository component of the ReShare CDL solution with Haiku, working with SoftServe. The Davis Educational Foundation gave BLC $250,000 a couple of years ago too, to help underwrite some of that early development and community building work together with Index Data. We had planned to go as BLC live with an early group of implementers in August. That did not happen. The project right now is certainly on hold and sort of in limbo. BLC as a consortium, we're not located in the second district, but we have a couple of libraries that are, which make navigating the decision a particularly complicated one for the consortium. Our board of directors had, prior to the decision, laid out a set of parameters for us to be able to pursue CDL that were by and large consistent with the initial court ruling around, commercially available ebook, licensed ebooks are off the table, makes good sense. We had built out mechanisms to check the commercial availability of books for every loan that was initiated. And we hope to get back to it. And I think just a lot more work needs to be done navigating how we go from here. But all that said, I think that the CDL work that we've done has certainly taken us to where we've been able to get to with respect to ReShare Digital by building out that functionality to facilitate the controlled lending of whole digitized books. It takes us that much closer to being able to loan ebooks, because that is closer to be able to loan book chapters. That's really very exciting. BLC's work in CDL is certainly continuing. We were given an IMLS grant last summer to help scale adoption of CDL for consortia and for libraries. We've got a report coming out, I think it's in about 2 weeks. You can see the cover of it here, though it's kind of buried by these people on the screen, but a report focused on the workflow components of using ReShare for CDL. Forthcoming, we have a toolkit to help guide future implementations, and then we'll be hosting a summit at some point next year to help chart future directions and really navigate the role of CDL in library lending. I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan, who can talk us through a little bit about our community priorities and how we went about voting on where to focus our initial efforts in ReShare Digital.
You're taking the soda? Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Jones from the New School in New York City. One of the things that I pride myself particularly with participating in Project ReShare is the community focus of it. There are other vendor organizations where you kind of set features in a particular product. One of the things I think that differentiates ReShare is that it is completely and 100% community driven. So we basically put out five different, we solicited the community. We basically had those features around 5 different themes. And you'll see here, these themes basically kind of gelled around 4 or 5 different. None of these should be a surprise. Tokenized URLs for ebooks, that's kind of going on in different types of vended spaces. Licensed ebooks, whether we hosted them or whether they were actually hosted at ProQuest or they were hosted at JSTOR or some other place. CDL enhancements, especially with everything that was going on with Hachette and everything, you could definitely see that people were less interested in that. And actually, one of the things that we realized was a lot of the work that we had done with BLC could actually be pivoted to a lot of the work that was done with ebooks and other types of things. So rather than just thinking about this as controlled digital lending for physical books, maybe this is actually controlled digital lending for electronic materials as well. And so as you kind of expand the scope of some of your thinking about what controlled digital lending really is, then some of these features, you can definitely see that there are 2 areas that people are really interested in. Book chapters, that should be no surprise to anybody, and ebooks. Part of that was because of the work that we had done, the t-shirt sizes or the relative difficulty of some of this stuff was actually rather low. And so I'm going to go into a demo of some of the tokenized URL stuff in a bit. Okay. So the initial phases for development here, we jump started. Usually the way that our product process happens is that we have subject matter experts. Those subject matter experts actually come up with functional requirements. Those functional requirements then go to a product team that kind of puts together a roadmap. And then it also goes to the developer team, which then scores those, kind of the difficulty of those particular tasks. And then based on that, they come up with t-shirt sizes as far as what the effort of that is going to be. Is this a small shirt or is this an extra large shirt? This kind of thing. So by doing that, we kind of have a sense of relative effort, but then the other side is we also have a sense of what the priority is for the community. And so we can grade basically how the roadmap is built based on what it is that the community is asking for, and are there intermediary steps that we could actually be taking that could get us there. one of the things that's been really amazing is working with Minitex, the Minnesota Public and Private Consortium. We were able to actually take part of that RFP and build in another set of features that would actually get us even closer to tokenized URLs, as well as to book chapters as well. So here are the three phases. You can see that phase one is just kind of putting together those subjects. The second is actually kind of putting together what an ebook pilot would actually look like. So this means we actually have to talk to vendors of ebooks and actually get them to say, yeah, we're willing to issue you tokens. So some of that work is going on right now. And then thinking about what that actually means for chapter delivery. And one of the things, believe it or not, that's the hardest thing to get agreement over is how you actually transfer a file. Because so many, it sounds stupid, but there's so many different ways and so many different networks that people actually do use. Plus then there's Iliad and Odyssey. So what the heck do you do with that? I mean, you know, the joke of it is, and I'll get to this in a second, what we opted for in the first instance, and I love this, the irony of it writes itself, is article exchange. Because we could just basically copy and paste the URL the same way we would do tokenized URLs for articles and book chapters. Here's a list of the kind of features since the very beginning release. We're at 1.16 now, and here's just a list of the sponsors for that. That really put together kind of a fundraising effort to kind of build what is kind of our first entry into non-returnables. So here we have an empty form. Mike Taylor knows this form probably better than anybody. Almost all of the different elements of an article or book chapter are represented here for open URL. Nobody likes people filling out blank forms. I'll be the first to say that. Again, this is kind of a first MVP type of thing. But the really interesting thing about this is that we can basically have a copyright pop up. We can get the request sent, and then the request basically comes in as a copy as opposed to a loan. So already we're starting to set up the scanning state model. When you get to kind of the metadata of it, if an operator actually wants to submit a request and maybe update a request, that's fine. They can also take information from the shared index and pull that in and overwrite it so that you can actually have you can find a more likely supplier for this. You know, who knew that having an ISBN could help you find a supplier, right? And those pesky students, they just don't put them there. So again, it's nice to at least have this functionality where in case somebody doesn't supply it, it's something that is can be supplied. Now, from the request app here, we're just doing kind of north and south. You can see that we've sent this, and now the supplier actually has it. So this is what the supplier is actually seeing. They see the request, they get the request, and they respond basically that they're able to supply it. Now for Minitex, they actually, in case they need to go to the stack, they need to pull a pull slip with all the relevant information for anything that's scanned. If it's a chapter out of an ebook, they don't need to print this. They could just mark this as printed and go on their merry way. Once they have it, what's happening now is they're just uploading the file into Article Exchange. They're grabbing and they're copying and pasting the URL. That URL will basically be sent back to the requester. The requester will actually get an email. They'll also get a link in my account that they could actually download the file in. And then the request becomes completed. So that's the entire kind of workflow. From if I was to talk about copy in 1866, I'd love to talk about that, but you probably don't want to. So you'll see that from that basic messaging framework, and it's something that's really important that we start with delivery, just kind of getting the framework and shell of it already built. Now we're starting to think of things like, what would an open source Odyssey server look like? Because anybody who's anybody is probably using Iliad or some other request management software. They're using Rapid or some other type of thing. We need to be able to talk network to network, not just reshare node to reshare node. So from a compatibility standpoint, we're asking ourselves, what are the most used protocols to do this type of file transfer? Sometimes it's things as simple as secure file transfers. Royal Danish Library and others just basically dump something on an FTP site. Somebody picks it up. So FTP has to be supported. You know, as you begin thinking about and inventorying all of these download methods, they all have to get incorporated into this workflow. But here's the scaffold. What I showed you is the effective scaffolding of it. Okay. Now, a little bit more into ebook ILL, we're getting into kind of 4 flavors of it is what we're looking at. The first, and you can think about this from the perspective of the patron in the discovery layer, right? You have a patron going to a bib record. What happens if some libraries have a DRM-free copy of it and some folks have it for a 2-week loan and tokenized URL? Others have it as they're only allowed to download 100 pages of the book, whatever. So there are going to be different types of lending offers, effectively, that are going to have to be made within the discovery layer so that students actually know what it is that they're getting when they're requesting this. A lot of times we just assume it's going to be a PDF. Not necessarily. It could be a PDF of a book chapter, it could be a PDF of the whole book, or it could just be a loan that they have for a couple of weeks. By the way, most vendors or most publishers seem to be kind of congealing around 2 weeks for a loan for ebook ILL. So, you know, how do you display that to the patron so that they actually know what it is that they're getting when they request this thing? Other types of things, we're looking at using Haiku and the stuff that Palmi and Palsy put together to actually have a shared ebook collection. And then we actually have different distributed digital asset management systems where IB Plus wants to actually have hosted theses and dissertations within their DIMs, but they want to be able to have that discoverable within a shared index. So there's all kinds of different flavors of where the files live and how they actually get shuttled around back and forth. And then finally, I think a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about really starts pushing on the concept of what digital loaned actually is. A lot of the work that's happening around ebook ILL is based on licenses. And licenses kind of only take us so far. If anything, we've learned that from the Hachette case that we're spending a lot of money for a limited amount of material or limited number of connections to this material, rather than really thinking about what a digital owned copy of a file would actually look like, and who can we borrow, who can we lend it to, who can have access to it, who can't have access to it. We've been partnering with Library Futures and Jenny Rose Halperin to kind of think about what are the kind of values that we want to espouse for digitally owned material. When you think about how much libraries are actually spending with ebooks and with scholarly communications, it's in the billions of dollars. Yet, the licenses that are for these ebooks are actually becoming more and more restrictive. So what would kind of thinking about what a digitally owned book from an electronic book actually look like? There's a pilot that we're going to be doing with Publisher that actually is looking at some of these models. And we're thinking about this from the perspective of group reading and actually controlling access to the number of people who can have access to it. One file, but potentially up to 300 people would have access to it at a time. So just to kind of go over the roadmap really quick, there's the book chapters that I talked about, certainly with ebook ILL and all of the different flavors that I talked about. There's the hosted ebooks that are kind of next. One of the things that we're looking at within Haiku is an EPUB reader and what an EPUB reader would actually look like, not just from the perspective of what it looks like in a browser, but also what it would look like in kind of a mobile type of setting as well. So thinking about what flowable text actually looks like within the repository. And of course, all of it has to work with Iliad. That just seems to be kind of a thing for ILL folks, imagine that. And then later, we're actually going to get to talking about articles. Articles present a whole host of other challenges because almost everything I've talked about before have been monographs. The minute you start thinking about how do you parse a text-based 866 field in terms of your text summaries holding statements as far as what you have and what you don't have, how do you identify what a missing issue is? That seems to be right for something that AI could actually handle, but we're nowhere near there yet, so we've got a lot of road to build. The other thing, I think this is you. This is still me. Oh, whoops. Okay. I do want to talk a little bit about what Charlie was talking about in terms of the work that's going on in Australia, because there are some really exciting things that are going on there. There's within the National Library, there's a requirement to have publics as well as academics work within the same lending system. And so thinking about what this looks like from a digital perspective is really exciting. And so everything that's working is going to have to work with not just the kind of single vendor type of stack that the National Library is using, but that single vendor stack is going to have to talk to all of these heterogeneous public libraries and everything that they're working with. So there's going to be a lot of variability, a lot of variation. There's also going to be a lot of indigenous language in terms of the catalogs that we're going to have to struggle with and deal with in terms of how that looks and how it's actually represented within the common catalog. So what this basically means is that if we've got an Australian network over here, we have a North American network over here, we have a number of different groups even within that North American network, whether it's PALC, whether it's PALC, whether it's IPLC, all of these different smaller groups. How do we actually get these folks talking together? So one of the things that Charlie has actually been the lead with, along with Joe Morris at PALC, is not thinking about the technology, but thinking about what are the social norms that have to happen to actually get these groups to interoperate and to interlend with one another. Do there have to be things like common lending periods? Do you have to decide on what types of payments and fees have to be associated with each of these different groups? And what does the social part of that actually look like? So there's a number, I think this is Boaz now.
Thanks, Ellen.
Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of, Ellen is actually the perfect person to talk about ISO 18626, but we need to divide the thing. What I wanted to say is, like, ReShare is an advocacy membership organization, and obviously, and we are here in WOLFcon, and every time we talk practical systems and all those things, there's a lot to still be desired. There are a lot of other things, intellectual debates, what means what is a license, how do we do open source well? And I think because we're kind of learning as we go, ReShare is one more example of us doing it quite successfully. So I wanted to say that ReShare is deliberately an advocacy group as well. And what Ellen just covered, like kind of thinking about the limits of international lending, international borrowing is like something we're very busy with, and diversifying our collections, diversifying our offerings. So I think that's the right, okay, so here are all the things that one day in 2027, so Ellen says, gonna be provided by this one standard. And this is the strength of, like the system. We're thinking, if we're thinking international standards from the get-go, then we're able to do more with what we're doing right now. So one day, soon enough, we're gonna have all those incorporated into the standard.
Whoa. Let me kind of contextualize this for a second.
I knew
This is
that
not what
I'm gonna-
we're going to have.
All right.
So 2027 is a proposed new version of the 1866 standard. These are features that are actually potentially being introduced into that standard. So one of the things that I really appreciated from the advocacy role of ReShare is the fact that we're the first set of implementers, librarians, systems folks that are actually on the editorial group of this particular standard. Not the implementer, or not the vendors. The vendors are also there. But the fact that there are actually librarians who are guiding the use cases of where the standard is going is huge. It's a very big shift in terms of thinking about how standards between vendors are actually working. And so these are some of the functions and the features that are potentially being introduced into this new version of the 1866 standard. Sorry about that.
No, that's good. But we like working with each other. We learned all of those good things from what we do. So kind of thinking kind of more about the advocacy side of things. We're thinking we share. So like, luckily enough, share is like a common enough action. And we're thinking, like we don't own everything. We're using all those different systems across different countries with different behaviors, and we sometimes even the terminologies are different. So what we'd like to kind of think is there a way to fundamentally agree on some basics between all those libraries and consortia? What is the kind of minimum agreement that we need to kind of think of when we're thinking system to system, when we're thinking vendor to vendor, when we're thinking consortia to consortia, across countries, across priorities, and all of that. So for now, we're calling it ReShare because again, kind of thinking about this more as a movement and a mechanism to achieve the goals that we want to be achieving. So I work in Lehigh. I'm the director of the library. I'm also the communication marketing chair for ReShare, and many of our staff members are busy actually making this whole thing work. So we have developers that give code away. We have people that are working with all those nice people across systems. Basically, similarly like Folio, like kind of thinking, like we're going to work together on similar challenges. We are focused on this particular functionality because we think it's so essential to library users that we really want it to be successful. So here are some challenges, that we encounter. Thank you. When I saw the open door, I was like, that's the way we are working all the time. And sometimes it's fun, sometimes too much, like it kind of depends on what day it is. But how do you ask for a particular format? How do you communicate with other libraries? What do you want? When is something shipped? How do you deploy a service like ebook lending? All those questions, we have some answers already, and we're going to be going for those. So the things that we think we know already, that we can already make happen, like what was described as like a BLC policy, cross consortia, lending and standards is one thing we're going to be trying soon. Hopefully we're going to have some funding to do those things. And then there's a lot of talk here about open data, and that's great. And we love the idea of open data and open standards and all of that. And we have some examples already of like ways by which data in ReShare is not isolated, is not siloed. We have several other systems that we're already interoperable with. So like, for example, POD, the Iris Plus data lake, we're working together with them to kind of think what is it that we can do with each other. We are thinking standards again. So when it comes to, the ebook reader that Charlie mentioned, we're thinking, well, what do we need to do to kind of make sure that EPUBs are being read while you're using ReShare? LDP is the library data platform. You probably heard a lot about it from our friends in Index Data and others. So we are thinking, well, what do we do? And also not just where the data is going to be residing, but what can we empower by having that data? What type of new functionality, what type of new things we can do using LDP. And we use an algorithm that Goldrush, you may know, the system is using to match records. And, like kind of, we're thinking open standards, open identifiers. What can we do to kind of make sure that those things actually talk with each other in a way that is more interoperable than what we have right now? And, like this is a kind of a project that I've been leading for a little while now, thinking about collaborative collection development. So thinking, if we have an amazing resource sharing system, what do we need to kind of think the next step to think about collection development at scale, across countries, across consortia, and what data can we pick up from LDP or for other sources to kind of make sure that our collection development activities are pointed and focused at things we really want to be acquiring for our own local library or to many other libraries. So yeah, we hope that that was good, and we really want to engage with you. If you're interested, if there's something that you want to be contributing and learn more about, talk with us. We'd love you to just get engaged and maybe even work on something we're working on or something we don't even know we need to be working on. So thanks very much. I think we have some time for questions, Jesse. How much time? 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Okay.
So another thing that I just want to say, Boaz kind of hinted at, but I want to really highlight it here. One of the focuses behind the open data ecosystem and WeShare is that the supplier shouldn't govern which resource sharing software you use. So one of the biggest emphases here is bidirectionality. I need to know in real time that something is shipped, that something is on its way, and if it's a digital object, that what I need to do in order to pick it up and give it to my patron. So there are kind of very high level marks that have to be met. I'm a Rapido customer, right? I want ReShare transactions to show up in Rapido. I don't want to have another, I don't want to have another platform that I process my ReShare transactions in. And I don't know why I'm pointing at Charles. But the point being that it should all work. It should all be transparent and it should be clean. You shouldn't have to worry about it, and it should be standardized using an 1866 stack. So that messaging core is critical in us being able to build this type of functionality across vendors.
Yes. I've never heard of this ISO 18626 before. So,
oh my God.
So this is new, right?
No, it's been around since 2011. Where you? No. Actually, like anything in libraries, it's been kind of slow to be adopted. It kind of really hit a lot of, you may have heard of ISO lending that happened with ILL, was using an older protocol, 10160 and 10161. 1866 made it web-based. So everything happens over HTTP and HTTPS. So rather than that messaging being kind of machine to machine, you could actually have it, you could have machines communicate over the open web using a RESTful API, XML, and HTTP, rather than using kind of the more arcane form of protocols.
It's known that Ellen just loves that part.
I do say it's beloved.
Almost as
Yeah.
close as Diet Coke consumption.
Yeah, that's
I
a
share.
close second.
Yeah, gold rush clustering so presumably when libraries have the same title, it's able to match that. So often in Folio, we have the same issue. Is that like to the Folio, like is that clustering within our own instance of Folio when we have multiple libraries with the same title? Is that something that could translate and help?
It could, the problem is that the catalogers don't always use the same metadata to talk about the same thing. And so there are frequently, particularly, think about, for example, the Akira series, the graphic novel series that has a number of volumes. Sometimes the volume isn't a specific, the volume number is actually part of the title, sometimes it's not. Now try to give a series of that and dedo where other people have maybe grabbed different records or cataloged it differently to say that that thing is definitively the same thing as the thing where volume 5 is in the title. It's very difficult using the Gold Rush algorithm because it's based on a certain number of characters within the title, as well as other identifiers, but not ISBN and other things. So this is part of what we're seeing is kind of the limits and the use cases, because when you get to ebooks, all bets are off in terms of the vendor generated metadata. So we really are looking for a different way or a better way of deduping those bibliographic records.
But maybe it can be, I mean, I just don't know enough to say, that's,
Where it works really well are things like books. Where it sucks is music. Music is absolutely a horror story.
And also that algorithm is being worked on, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other questions? If you want to join us, stickers here, somebody on Zoom?
I don't know.
I don't know. How do we know? There's a way to know. Sorry.
I think the attendees are down that black corner thing on the right that says talking Charlie.
You're unallowed to.
Yeah, I was just. Okay, it's just Carl. Not just Carl. I'm sorry, man.
Question then, yeah. So, you talked about allowing groups of readers. So the number one way I can think of that, is not controversial to give ebooks to groups is for course reserves. So where you have, 300 students registered for a course, we know that that's fair use
15
access.
Students is one
And-
copy.
Yeah, and so you want 300 people reading,
Right.
have a controlled access, and you're not really worried about copyright.
Mhm.
What was the other use case? I can't think of another case where you have 300 people wanting the same, like that you're planning the software around it. Was it?
I think so, like this is a good, what, like the controlled type of questions, like so course reserves, we have like an own to loan ratio, 15 students kind of sort of. 15 students are gonna read a course reserve, so that means one copy. If there are 30 students, we're gonna be buying 2 copies of the course reserve material, things like that. And that element of a ratio is what we were working on the CDL front. Like, what is it that, how many is what, and how many licenses do we need to allow CDL to happen seamlessly? We're kind of a little stuck with, those ratios, even though the budget.
Something that I think is different than a lot of other pilots that are happening with this, the publishers are involved. And so they're interested in it from a revenue point of view, obviously. We're in it from a kind of how far can we push this limit of lending, right? And what's the mechanism to make that happen, whether it's EPUB or whether there's some other secure format. The kind of moonshot is an appless ebook reader, right? I mean, something that somebody could go to, they could open on their phone, or they could download the ebook, and then would reserve a license that somebody would be able to use for a limited amount of time, but wouldn't necessarily compromise after the public reading session is over, right? It wouldn't cannibalize the number of books that could be sold later after that session. So there's a lot of different types of potential use cases for this that we're just beginning to explore with Library Futures. And I really am interested to see what that subject matter experts group kind of comes up with in terms of our set of functional requirements.
The other work that I just mentioned, cursory kind of wise, was the CCLP work, the Collections Lifecycle Platform. And kind of thinking, if we have so many users, we have consortia talking with each other, we have libraries talking with each other, the number of minimum libraries using the book obviously is going to be rising, because we have a lot of it, many users across the world. Hopefully. So, and we that's also a negotiation tool for us, because like, you know, as we're starting to kind of rebuild those relationships with publishers, we at this point, we don't have lots of tools to actually go to them and say, look at the data. All those libraries, all those users are using this particular book right now. What do we need to do in order to make it seamless? What do we need to do to make sure that your profits are okay, you know, but at the same time, we're thinking open access, small publishers that don't have any almost visibility in our systems at this point, you know, like we're talking, but this is kind of a little bit going to the collection development side and less about the resource sharing, but all of it, because those are affiliate projects, so kind of thinking about, you know, like how do we go together, thinking up the stream and down the stream of our scholarly communication lifecycle, what are the things that we can improve on? So those ratios are really important for us, because then we can say, look at the mass of users, you know, this is what's happening right now here. We have the data.
Just to kind of crystallize what it is that a lot of publishers are bringing to this. And I couldn't believe somebody was as frank with us as they were, but they said, I don't want to sell a single book to the entire state of California. And so if you think about that from a lending perspective, if you think about that in terms of, you know, I think we do really well in the academic space to think about something like course reserve, but in public libraries, they don't really have that kind of functionality where they can actually put it aside and do that type of work. What would that look like electronically? I mean, for us at Muse School, if they're, you know, we have turnaway protection where we just continue to buy these books, right? You know, but then somebody uses that book, you know, kind of over and over and over again. A lot of public libraries do one and done with these types of group licenses. They don't want to be stuck with 300 copies of something. That's not a good use of public funds. So we need to think these types of, you know, again, social as much as technology issues and think about what that means in terms of revenue for the publishers.
Any other questions? Last little.
Eliana has a question.
I saw one of the slides about NSIP and item holds. Does this mean item level holds will be possible? We currently use share it with NSIP. What do you think, Alan, about this question?
So the question is, I understand it is if we'll be able to place item level holds on items that are currently in ReShare. That functionality already exists with the implementation of NSIP 2. So if the ILS that is connecting to ReShare supports NSIP version 2, that functionality is there. If, however, you have an older ILS, and we had this problem a lot because we were connecting with Aleph at the time, you won't be able to place holds there if you're just using NSIP version 1.1.
Their folio.
Oh, they're folio?
Yeah.
So then they would, yeah.
So yes.
Okay, would you know that? I wouldn't.
No, that's what I'm telling you. With
There
us.
was another person raising their hand there.
No.
And there's another question to the slides for sure.
Yeah, it's tough.
I think WOLFcon is sharing the slides, but we'll put these on the Project ReShare website as well, projectreshare.org.
Okay, thanks very
Thanks, everyone.
much.